For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Lauren Glover, and I'm a member of the marketing team here at TrueAccord. Welcome to Machine Learning 101 for collections and recovery professionals. To kick us off today, I'm going to give you an overview of what you can expect out of today's webinar, and we'll do a little housekeeping before we get going as well. So why are we here? I bet you already know, but in 2021, there's hardly any industry that hasn't begun to embrace machine learning, and the collections and recovery industries are certainly no exception. But however, for many of us, especially those of us, and myself included, who have non-technical or non-computer science backgrounds, there's still a lot of questions about what machine learning exactly is, what are its benefits, and how can we be sure that there will be a good long-term ROI if we embrace it now? And answering these questions is really essential because we all want to embrace machine learning responsibly and make sure that we're making the right decision for our businesses if we embrace it. So today we are delighted to give you a crash course in machine learning for collections and recovery in two different ways, and that brings us to today's agenda. So first, we're going to kick things off by talking to Ohad Samet, the CEO and co-founder of TrueAccord. We're going to do a quick primer on all the essentials and FAQs about machine learning for collections and recovery. Then we're going to move into a fireside chat where we'll talk to Todd Johnson, the senior vendor manager at Snap Finance, and we're going to see an applied case of machine learning in collections. Todd is going to lead us through the story of how Snap moved from a more traditional collections model to embracing machine learning driven collections. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with Q&A. And as a reminder, you can submit questions via the chat function or via the Q&A function, and you can find that in the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen. No need to wait to the end to submit questions. You can submit questions all along, and in fact, we're actually going to raffle off a $50 gift card to DoorDash for anyone who submits a question today. We'll pick a winner out of the questions after, and we'll be in touch later this week. So without further ado, let's get going with Machine Learning 101. Hi, Ohad, I'm excited to talk to you about this.
Hi, everyone. How you doing? Excited to be here. Let's go.
Great. Well, let's just jump into it. Ohad, what in the world is machine learning, and why should we as people in the collections and recovery industry care?
Yeah, so I think when people talk about machine learning, and sometimes they throw a little bit of artificial intelligence into it, there's a lot of magical thinking and kind of black boxes and stuff like that. And, you know, at the end of the day, if you do it well, it should be pretty straightforward to understand. And machine learning for us and in general is teaching a machine how to learn from data in order to improve over time. And the way I like to talk about this to collection professionals is when you hire a call center agent, a collections agent, you put them on the phone, no matter how much training you give them upfront on compliance and collections and talk off, you give them a script. At the end of the day, when they get on the phone, they get the first objection, they have to talk to their first consumer, they're going to fumble because they're not used to talking to people. They're not used to managing objections. When you take someone who's 5 years in, 10 years in, and they've had so many conversations, those people are professionals. They're the best, your best earners. They're the ones who know how to talk to consumers and overcome objections. They know how to create rapport. And a well-built machine learning system is exactly that. It learns from every interaction. It improves with every interaction. And it does better and better to service every consumer, respond to their objections, and get better in driving them towards an actual resolution. Unlike a person, it doesn't forget. So when we have more than 17 million accounts have gone through our system and we send tens of millions of interactions a month, digital communications a month to consumers, the system does that based on all of its historic data. And when it looks at one consumer to decide what it wants to do, it can look at all of the consumers that are similar to them among those 17 million and growing number of historical accounts to decide what's the best contact strategy, what's the best offer strategy, what's the best frequency of communication, and so on. And what we find consistently for us and for every area where machine learning is applied is that humans are good with the edge cases, but when you need to provide consistent data-driven treatments at scale, machine learning, the ability to tap into the historical data and to learn from each interaction, say, oh, I think that's going to work. Oh, no, it didn't work very well. I'm going to try something else. Oh, that worked well. I'm going to do that more often, provides a much better performance. And you should care mostly because we'll talk a little bit about the benefits, I think, in the next question, but you should care mostly because technology has evolved to a point where you can apply this level of sophistication to your operation at scale in a compliant way and not have to think about your scaling and your complex operations only based on humans. We used to say, or people used to say in the industry, only humans collect from humans. That's not true anymore. And being able to apply technology, like you hear Todd talking about it for Snap, just transform your business.
That's great. Yeah, I want to drill down more. Let's talk in more specifics about benefits and risks, and especially around this idea of, as you just said, only a person can collect from a person, but the idea of personalization is actually really powerful within machine learning collection. So let's start there when we talk about and then dig into the benefits and risks.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of benefits, I see three benefits. Number one, it's a better customer experience. Channel of choice, time of choice. Consumers react to virtual agents and interact with them and respond to them. We actually often have consumers thanking a virtual agent that they've had a very consistent interaction with over time. And we think of it as a win. Because we're pretty upfront about those names being virtual agents, and being able to provide an empathetic, consistent experience that consumers actually appreciate is a win for the machine learning algorithm. As a result of better user experience, we also see, yes, better results in liquidation, but also a significant drop in complaints and legal exposure, which is another thing that we as an industry look at and care about a lot. When you give consumers a better user experience, a better personalized experience, you give them a sense of control in the process. They are just less likely to try and kind of pin you and create FTCPA-related issues for you or other types of litigation or threats of litigation. The second point is scalability. We're all being asked to do more with less, and especially as the economy is going back on track, people going back to spending, credit volumes going back up, with them defaults. We are going to be, or all of us are going to require larger operations, and trying to scale with humans is just hard in this employment environment. It's hard to hire new people with high turnover in call centers. Just replacing retraining is a huge headache. If you can replace a significant amount of your headcount with a machine learning based solution, I mean, we like to say 96% of our resolutions are completely automated. That means 96% of what you would treat with a call center does not need to be treated with a call center in TrueAccord's environment. Think about the scalability. Even if half of it was true for your operation, that's a huge difference. And the last thing is humans have biases, right? We wake up in the morning, we don't feel well, we argue with our significant other, we're hungry, we're not making our goals, whatever. That leads us into making bad decisions. And we know that we see more compliance violations by the end of the month by agents who are stressed about making their numbers, right? That's a well-known thing. This system doesn't get tired, doesn't get angry, it doesn't get tilted, even if it's being called names or is in a tough situation, and that allows us to provide consistent treatment at scale that's personalized to the individual consumer. And together, all these things, they lead to better results and they lead to lower complaints.
Nice.
In terms of risks, should we?
Let's dig into the risks.
Yeah, I think two things to highlight. Number one, if you don't have, you need to have a good component in your system that enforces compliance and kind of make sure that the machine learning system stays within the bounds of what's required under the FTCPA and state laws. We have our own compliance checker that in the rare case that the machine learning system recommends something that would not fall within our policies and procedures, it just kills that action. It doesn't, it overrides it and it blocks everything. That's really important, because if you don't do that well, a system at scale creates violations at scale, right? That's important to remember. If you make a programming error and you don't have a component or a system set up like we do, you can make a mistake with hundreds of thousands of people. And the other element is that if you don't think very carefully about what data you use and where you buy it from and how you model, you can create biases and you can create a disparate impact to consumers. We don't use any demographic data. We have built a system based on behavioral data, especially to prevent ourselves from like putting demographics into our inference. And we don't really buy credit data for the purposes of making those decisions. So making sure that we don't ingest data that would create an issue from a fair lending perspective is critical, and that requires subject matter expertise.
That's really interesting. I actually am, we're going to show an example in just a moment, but I wonder if you can explain a little more about what behavioral data means.
Yeah, so behavioral data is basically, and this is another thing that's important for us, that's different in a digital first system than a call phone-based system. You know, when the agent is on the phone with a consumer, they're expected to understand the cues in talking and how the consumer interacts to understand what the objection is and where the consumer is. Automating, digitizing that is very hard. But for us, since the vast majority of our interactions are digital and online, we can look at consumer behavior. We can look at whether they opened an email, how many times, what device, what times of day, whether they clicked the link in the SMS, what was their browsing pattern, what buttons and knobs did they play with. To be clear, only on our assets, right? We don't look at people and their browsing pattern on the web or something like that. But that is a treasure trove of data to understand, basically like on the call, what's their objection, what are they interested in, are they engaged or not? And that allows the system to continuously tailor a treatment for the consumer that is unique to them and their own pattern.
Right. And in terms of like when they're most likely to open email and, you know, based on their particular relationship to opening a text or listening to a voicemail drop or something like that, because we all have, you know, slight variations in how we do things like that.
Correct. What's their channel of choice? What's the payment offer that's going to get them over the hump in terms of flexibility and timing? Whether they need to, whether the system needs to cross channels, because they will open an email, but if they get an email and a text or an email and a voicemail drop, they're more likely to actually engage. This is all data that's actually in our system. The machine learning engine, Heartbeat, can tap into it and decide how to tweak its treatment, how to tweak its approach in order to get the consumer to actually engage.
Super interesting. So let's talk a little bit about whether or not machine learning refers to one thing. Are there different variations in approach? Yeah, what is all machine learning the same? And if not, what are the differences?
Yeah, so without going into the world of options that are out there, deep learning and neural networks and this and that, and like, you know, I think sometimes the discussion gets a little bit too technical. Here's how we think about this. Number one, a lot of times when people say machine learning, they mean some type of scoring. You get the consumer, you get them a score, you put them in a segment, and then they get a treatment of like, for segment A, there's like an email after 2 days and the text after 3 weeks and so on. And for segment B, there's a different treatment. With us, because of Heartbeat and its ability to react to consumer behavior in real time, there is real point in time decision making. Meaning, if we sent you the IDL or the ID, the initial demand email, and you open it versus you don't open it, versus you open it multiple times, versus you open it and you click one link versus the other, and so on and so forth, there's a huge tree of options that is not predetermined, but it reacts to your actual behavior. And that is what creates a significant difference, both in modeling, but also in results. Number two, of course, we have a lot more data. Again, 17 million accounts. That means that every consumer can be compared to a lot of other consumers that are similar to them, and we can learn from their behavior versus a smaller database that means that every new consumer is completely new to a system. And finally, something that we're really proud of, we don't have, our tech team in one area and our call center like offshore somewhere in, I don't know, in the Philippines, making phone calls. There's a deep integration between technology and call center. Our data science team, our engineering team continuously learn from the call center and what works, what doesn't work, uh, to the extent that, if they make a decision, if Heartbeat makes a decision on something, the agent can basically say, yes, it was the right decision, or no, it was the wrong decision. And that is something that improves the model over time. So being able to learn from that feedback loop is another differentiator that we've invested a lot of time in.
That's really interesting. I think what might be helpful is to show some examples of what you're talking about in terms of, these treatments that are specific to each person. They're not based on segment or various groups. So let's take a look at this. And tell us about what these journeys. These are three potential customer journeys, and tell us a little bit about how Heartbeat, which is the name of TrueAccord's machine learning algorithm, how Heartbeat would sort of determine these different paths for each consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be mindful of the time because we want to hear from Todd. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and we can talk about it in Q&A or at a later time if someone wants to hear more. But the idea is that each response to the initial communication feeds in real time into the system. So these three profiles may get the exact same initial communication at the exact same time, but based on their engagement, meaning did they open the email or not? You see, the first profile didn't open an email. And so Heartbeat decided to reinforce the message with a different channel. We call this the cross-channel halo effect of improving from like a baseline of communication by using additional channels to enforce the message. The third profile did open the email, but decided to talk to an agent. When they talk to an agent, the results of that call also feed into the machine learning system. Again, because if they make a promise on the call and the system needs to follow up on that promise and get them to sign up to an actual payment plan, it needs to know to react to the consumer's mindset and to what they actually promised they would do. And of course, the second profile is the best one. You send them the initial communication, they click a link, they complete a payment. But we know that the ability to react to changes in the life of the consumer, their available income, their ability to stick to a previously agreed to arrangement is critical. And that's what we're trying to show here. Every interaction is an opportunity to reassess, reevaluate, and decide, do I need to pivot or not? And it's done automatically based on historical data and not based on a human making decisions. And that is why it's powerful.
That is amazing. Well, thank you so much. And this is a really cool application of the beginning of our conversation. And now we're going to take this conversation and apply it even more and see a real world example. So it's time for our fireside chat. I'll stoke the fire, get it ready. But I am now delighted to introduce all of you to Todd Johnson, who is the Senior Vendor Manager at Snap Finance. Welcome, Todd. Thank you so much for being with us today. Here, I've just asked to unmute you just a moment.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be with you here today.
Well, thanks so much. It's so wonderful to have you here, Todd. So just first things first, just to say that Snap Finance is a TrueAccord client. So we just want to get that up first. But we're going to tell a kind of bigger story about your process in selecting a collections provider. So why don't we start by just tell us a little bit about Snap Finance and your role there.
Sure. Snap Finance is a virtual lease-to-own financing provider in the subprime market. We have a nationwide network of merchants where a potential customer who can't receive traditional financing but may need tires or auto repair or may need some furniture can go in and actually apply through Snap Finance to lease-to-own the product. We do offer them a 100-day payoff. If they're not able to do that, they're able to pay that off in small payments over 12 months and choose their frequency, weekly, biweekly, or monthly.
Great. So now tell us a bit about, I know Snap's collections have really changed since the time that you've been there. You've sort of been the spearhead of a bunch of changes. So tell us, when you started, what were the collections processes like? What kind of channels were you using?
Yeah, I came to Snap in June of 2019. Had spent about 30 years between AT&T and Verizon prior to that in New Jersey. So coming from very large companies to a very small company was quite an interesting change. I was brought in to build our third-party recovery program. At the time I arrived, the only recovery program we had for charged-off accounts at Snap was a settlement at tax season, right? So pretty much non-existent. And so we had to build a program from scratch, and Snap started doing business in really about 2013, 2014. So we had a large amount of backlog accounts that had never been worked by agencies, as well as, the need for a forward flow third-party recovery program. And so, as myself and my director were thinking about, okay, we get to do whatever we want here, right? We're not constrained by old ways of thinking. We can go any direction we want to head, right? And so we looked at a lot of different things. Of course, traditional agencies with call centers making outbound calls, sending letters, sending emails, so on and so forth. But our thought process is because we have subprime customers, they try to avoid us when we do our internal collections. They're going to try to avoid the traditional collection agency even more. So, who is out there doing different things, right? Who is out there that is actually using technology in a way that maybe most providers aren't? And I was familiar with TrueAccord back in my days with Verizon in their very early days. And so we talked about, let's look at TrueAccord who does a digital experience, right? And frankly, being an old dog like I am, I was extremely skeptical that email only would be able to deliver any type of results. But our thought process was, hey, we've got nothing to lose here. Let's give it a shot and see what happens. Um, and so, we basically A/B tested TrueAccord against some traditional suppliers. And the reality of the results really kind of knocked me upside the head because what we saw was almost 25 to 30% better performance on the accounts that we placed with TrueAccord than we saw through traditional agencies, which was an eye opener, right? And as a result of that, over time, we've increased their volume in the tiers that they play in for us on the third party side. So we've seen nothing but huge benefit as a result of that individual interaction with the consumer, right? Not treating at a segment level, not having to really worry about how many calls you have to make, right, in order to drive your margins and things of that nature. Because the tool is smart, it learns, right? The machine learns how that individual customer interacts with the experience and the engagement. And we've been just, one, very surprised, and two, extremely impressed and pleased with the results. In fact, every tier that I have TrueAccord in, they're number one, and usually number one by 25 to 30% better than my traditional agencies.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm so glad it is working out. I want to go back to sort of your decision making process before you started with TrueAccord. And really, I think maybe there are people in the audience today who are weighing these decisions themselves and looking at collections vendors and weighing different options. So, what are some of the questions you were asking as you were evaluating different collection solutions providers?
Well, the biggest thing right now in our industry is compliance, right? Ensuring that what is actually being shared with the consumer is in compliance with FDCPA, with all state regulations. We're all familiar with those types of things. So, how do you ensure that, those interactions, the verbiage that's used from the catalog of responses is, something that, you're legal and you feel comfortable with from a compliance standpoint, right? And we were. There's a lot of information available out there in different types of responses, but TrueAccord is great at sharing what those are, right? And being able to review that and make sure that, oh yeah, okay, there's nothing out here that really is would ever concern us as far as a response with an interaction from a customer. The other thing that we were concerned about, of course, is you're always concerned about data protection, data privacy, right? And that the data that you're sharing is going to be secure, right? Because you are sharing a lot of PII. We all know what goes on in California and some other places in regards to that. So making sure that what we're going to share was going to be secure. None of that was going to leak out through whatever means necessary, and through thorough vetting with TrueAccord and our security team, we were able to confirm that as well. The other big piece is how quickly could we ask TrueAccord to make changes based upon things that happen, right? So we started with TrueAccord pre-pandemic, right? And I think first placements with TrueAccord were early February 2020. So by April of 2020, we were in a completely different circumstance than we were previously. And just the ability to how quickly they were able to support us and pause collections in areas that needed to be paused, modify whatever we needed to ask them to modify in order to kind of pull back a little bit for a period of time during that pandemic. Very easy to do. And the great thing about TrueAccord as well is because it's an email, right? I don't think that's as intrusive as trying to make a phone call at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Or even 2 months or 3 months in, because the consumer can react to that when they choose to, right? It's not that immediate, oh, it's somebody, click hang up. It could sit in the inbox for a while, and then subsequently they could go back and look and click that email and have that interaction at their own pace and at their own time, which I think was a big benefit during the pandemic, right? Because a lot of people were all of a sudden, well, gosh, I'm going to clean out my Yahoo inbox that's got 35,000 emails from 2002. So the reality for us was their ability to pivot and ask and change and do things that we needed them to do was really instantaneous. So that was, one of the big things we were looking at when we were looking at a digital partner, and what we had to do is, one, could they maintain compliance, right? How quickly could they modify strategy if we needed to have them modify strategy? And then the third thing is, how willing and open were they to be able to, try unique and different things. We always thought when we moved into our recovery program is we want partners who not so much are willing to push the edge, but do things that are different than have been done in the industry in the past. Because this is pre-CFPB ruling coming out too in regards to the number of attempts that can be made. And now if you think about it, they haven't really ruled specifically on how many emails or SMS or some of those types of things that can happen, right? But they have definitely ruled on, hey, you can make 7 attempts in 7 days. So that really limits that channel even more than probably it's ever been limited in the past. And so having a partner who does machine learning, who uses digital interactions, they don't skip a beat, right? When having to, finally implement that regulation, because they're not making outbound phone calls, right? And they're learning from every interaction. It'd be fantastic if we could put a chip in every collector's head and plug in and download every interaction that went on. It's science fiction and never going to happen. But with machine learning, you can do that. So, we've seen nothing but great results as a result of that decision, looking at those 3 key factors.
Nice. Thank you so much, Todd. I want to highlight a couple of the questions that you asked just for our audience. You talked about compliance, so that's something that's not on here, but I also want to just highlight, I think these questions as people in the audience are evaluating vendors and asking questions and getting to know their own machine learning technology of different vendors. These are some of the things that they can ask, right? Ask what data is being used to feed a machine learning engine. Something I like about Snap's story is that you really weren't afraid to ask questions about the data and really understand what was happening and not treat it like it was a black box that you were just going to sign off on. Also, the idea that personalization is happening on a consumer level, not a segment level. And that leads to better results, as we talked about earlier. And then also looking at how quickly adjustments can be made, because as we saw this past year, a lot of adjustments had to be made in a lot of different areas of our lives. And how prepared is your vendor to be able to tackle anything that comes along like this? And then finally, how long is it going to take to see results? So thank you so much, Todd. I want to take these two conversations and keep distilling them into takeaways for our audience. So we're going to call this our lightning round. We're going to share 3 critical questions that we think you should be asking when you're evaluating machine learning driven collections. And the first is this question of data that has come up a number of times. And we just want to keep hammering it home that all data is not the same. There's demographic data, behavioral data. And when we're looking at collection solutions, behavioral data is absolutely key. And you really are going to get in trouble if you start looking at, you're going to get into an area of bias and noncompliance if you start looking at demographic data. You also, another thing that maybe hasn't come up yet, but we want to highlight is this idea of self-service. Actually, Ohad did mention self-service. And if you're looking at self-service rates, that's sort of a really good proxy for understanding how well machine learning is working, how well it is tailoring the communications in ways that empower consumers to resolve debts on their own without talking to an agent. And then finally, asking about results. And knowing that the whole point of machine learning is that it improves over time. And so asking to see examples from results from companies like yours and making sure that you're seeing that improvement over time. So these, we think about this process of, onboarding vendors and finding digital collection solutions a lot. We've actually written an ebook about it. So I'll be sharing that with all of you after the webinar today. It's called our Buyer's Guide to Digital Debt Collection Solution. And it actually has 10 questions that encompass our whole conversation today that will help guide you as you're evaluating digital collections vendors. So thank you, Todd and Ohad. It is time now to move to our Q&A. And as everyone in the audience knows, I followed up yesterday and asked for questions in advance as well. So I'm going to start with those. Todd, I'm going to start with this question for you. I wonder, this question, hold on just a moment, let me pull it up. Yes, I wonder if you can talk about any challenges that Snap or you faced when you were bringing on TrueAccord.
No major challenges for the most part. I think it's critical anytime that you're, working with a new vendor, regardless if they're digital or not, you ensure that that, all of the data you're going to be providing to that vendor, they understand how to ingest it, they understand, how to protect it, right? And do a lot of testing just to make sure that, your placement files that you're sending are, being able to be ingested, you get acknowledgements back, they're providing timely remit files and the layouts, just standard stuff. So I didn't find anything that was extremely challenging or unique with a TrueAccord than I would with, say, some of the other players in the industry, whether it be a Convergent or a GC Services or some of the old traditional large collection agencies. I found it just as easy to work with them with that type of stuff than I did with a traditional agency. So nothing unique there from getting them ready to receive your accounts and then start working your accounts.
Interesting. Ohad, I'd like to hand it over to you. Maybe we can broaden this question about like common challenges that you see when onboarding new clients.
Yeah, some technical challenges here. Sorry. So broadening the question, I think, look, we've grown tremendously in the last few years. I think in a way that is not very common in the collections industry, and we've built a lot of systems from scratch, of course, bought some and so on. And so we have had to learn, because some of us are technologists and not from the industry, how to do reconciliation, how to build with old systems, not in Snap's case, but like more traditional banking systems, and how to provide different data structures, and as we continue to build the system. So it's been a learning experience for us. But yeah, as Todd has said, I mean, we're happy it is kind of around the edges, and we can show benefit while doing that. But it's obviously we've learned a lot from our clients as well. It's a two-way street here.
Great, thanks. I'm going to take another question that we received in advance, and Ohad, maybe I can throw this one to you first, and then Todd, feel free to chime in. But Let's see, this person said, what problems or areas have you found that machine learning and analytics is most helpful to solve within collections and approvals?
I would not exclude anything from the application of machine learning. Meaning, I think from first principles, there's no reason for machine learning to not apply to many different areas. In collections, the question is whether you want to invest the effort in building those solutions or not. For example, a lot of what we do, everything that we do in the collections process, who to contact, what frequency, what channel, with what agent name, with what content, what offer, and so on, that's all automated with machine learning. Inbound communications are automated and so on. Now, we don't use machine learning in replying to threatened litigation. Could we not? I think we could. Do we want to invest in that versus investing in performance for our clients? Not right now, because we have a great legal and compliance team. So it's a balance there in terms of prioritization. But machine learning has broad applications, and frankly, the more computing power we have in the world, the more potent it's going to be.
Great. Thank you. Todd, do you have anything to add in terms of specific problems that you were having before and that really the machine learning and the analytics solved for Snap?
Well, really for us, when we first started our placements, right, we didn't know what we didn't know. We could guess on what our liquidation rates might be because there's not a lot of sharing in the industry that I'm in regards to, what you should expect. So as we've built more history and we've built more data and more results, we find that, we get a better idea of what we can forecast for down the road as a result of that. So hard to say that we've really learned anything as a result of that, other than that, the machine learning tool that TrueAccord uses is more effective than what we've seen from traditional agencies. And I think maybe the thing we've learned is, as a result of that, we provide more volume to that tool than we would to a traditional agency because the results are better.
Nice. And something you said of we don't know what we don't know, that the phrase you used to talk about before, and how you didn't have the data to sort of understand what would work. There's something that we talk about a lot of like future proofing your collections. If you have more information, you can better prepare for the future. And that is something that we see too is a way to think about the benefit of machine learning driven collections.
Yeah, and I think maybe one of the things that we have learned is because we've seen so much success on the third party side, that it's made us think a little bit more of, okay, what can we do pre-charge off with machine learning and with the tools that are available out there, whether you want, to Ohad's point, do you want to invest and bring in data scientists and people like that to build your own, or do you want to work with someone who's proven that they can do it, right? I'm a firm believer that some of the things we do on the upfront side, right, in the pre-charge off world, we send SMS, we send text, but it's not very intelligent, right? It's, hey, you owe us this much, give us a call, be happy to work with you, or there's a link to go in and pay, right? We don't learn from that interaction, right? Which I think is the key here with machine learning, is the ability to learn and understand more about that individual customer's behavior and what is going to work for them in order to find a solution to get them to cure that account, right? So, one of the things we are looking at is what can we do with a TrueAccord on our upfront stuff, right? Do we have them manage all of our SMS and our email for us and make it smarter, right? Rather than just kind of, I'm not going to call it stupid, but it doesn't learn much. All the thing I learn is, okay, did they call in and pay or not, right? And if they don't do anything, I haven't learned anything. Where, machine learning through TrueAccord, you're going to know where they clicked, when they clicked, how often they went and looked, did they back out? So, and then you can tailor that to what's your next action, right, that you want to take. So I think that's the biggest learning for us is, hey, we see the results on the third party side. How can we leverage this on the first party side, to drive results there? Because the reality is, the better I am up front, the less I'm charging off and the more profitable my business is. And so that's the biggest learning for us is, okay, we probably can do a lot better job with our early stuff with machine learning and the assistance of a company who knows how to do it. You know, we could try to build it, but it could take us, 5, 10 years to figure it out and do it right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Lauren, if I can jump in, kind of piggyback on it, because there's a question from Chris Yao, a statement, we found that data integration from different systems is a challenge. And I absolutely agree, again, to Todd's point, you want to use these tools upfront in your first party environment, and you have a letter vendor and a website vendor and a texting vendor and an email vendor, and they don't all go to the same place, and integrating them is an issue. And yeah, absolutely, we use a single data store that integrates all of these vendors, whether with our retained early stage product, the white label product for your internal team, or with the recover product, because that is a prerequisite for being able to decide cross-channel. So 100%, it's an end-to-end solution that integrates all of these channels into one data store.
Great. Let's take another question. This one is from Dan. Ohad, can you talk about what auditing a machine learning algorithm looks like, and how do you make sure it's working as intended?
Yeah, that's an excellent question that can be answered with a very long answer. But the headline here is that explainability of machine learning systems is critical. It is a growing research area, and the way we solve it, we allow ourselves to explain, is that we don't use black box algorithms. We don't just, when you look at a neural network or similar algorithms, they're very hard to explain. Not impossible, but very hard. So we rely more on the ensemble of algorithms and our feature engineering than convoluted algorithms that are hard to explain. And so we can track back and see why we made a certain decision. In a way, that is another advantage of a code-based system rather than human-based system. You can actually ask, why did we make a decision, read the logs, and actually audit and understand.
Great. Yeah. So it's part of the process, essentially. The auditing is
100%.
part of the process. Yes, absolutely. Great. Well, let's see. I'm just going to scan these quickly. Someone asked, are there any clients who use machine learning for first-party collections? I think the answer is yes. That is a solution that TrueAccord has. And let's see, I guess William asked a question, who owns or controls the collected data?
It's a legal question. I believe the client owns the data. We hold the data according to data retention policies to adhere to compliance requirements with regulators and so on. But the client owns the data in terms of, if they at some point ask us to delete it, we need to delete it.
But yeah, but that's also a good question, just to highlight the role of, you want to find a vendor that has a strong legal and compliance team that is working with you to understand ownership issues and things like that. Well, thank you so much. We have some more questions, but I think a lot of these, I want to make sure we wrap before the hour so we can give people some time back. And we can reach out individually to everyone who has a question and follow up with you. Thank you so much, Todd and Ohad, for sharing your insights. And it was wonderful to have all of you here. And we hope to see you back again soon.